All right, so I'm going to give my thoughts on Alpha 4.0.x. I know there's dot .0, I know there's dot .1. We did the whole live preview thing. But I want to just go over my thoughts on everything really since the end of 2024, late December, around the holiday time to really to now. We're in February and just kind of where things have been at. For me personally, I did a lot of PTU testing live preview. SIG actually managed to break my account, and it took them about 3 weeks for them to figure out how to fix it because I could not access live preview. I could access the 3.24.3 live. I could access PTU until it went away. But I actually couldn't get on for 4.0 preview, which is just a joke. And it just shows how many issues they have. And they don't even, even from a customer service standpoint, they don't understand their processes. But with that, we do finally have Pyro, we have server meshing. There have been some hot fixes very recently that are working out, fairly well. I don't think they're perfect, but they are better. I've been able to do most things, but I'm still having issues with like mission markers, things like that showing up. I've been having issues with just reliability. Like I was doing an outpost, one of the fight for Pyro missions, and I went to an outpost to clear it out. I couldn't find the rest of the guys. There was like 35% left to clear out. Couldn't get it. Another time I went down and then my ship just clipped or something and then disappeared. So still lots of issues. Elevators have been weird. Sometimes they just don't work at all. Sometimes if I go like at least at Pyro, so like Obituary, Ruin, etc., if I go to the far right elevator, it seems to work. So I guess there's a workaround, but still just a huge pain. Lots of things that your basic gameplay is you wake up, you're in either a major city or a station or something. You need to go use an elevator, get to your ship, retrieve the ship, fly the ship, and now you can start doing really anything. That's been terrible. And the fact that that part of the game has been pretty much the same for, I don't know, I'll say close to a decade, is insane that they're still having issues. And I get that some of these issues are coming up as a result of server meshing and all that, but I just think that's kind of insanity. So they've done the communication as far as, hey, here's our current issues, kind of working backwards. The most recent thing is they canceled the free fly event, which I don't even know why they do the free fly events. I get that some people might have tried the game as a result of it. They got into it. They bought, a starter package or whatever. But I think that overall, it's just, the best form of advertising is word of mouth. And it's a double-edged sword where it's both a bad experience when the servers perform poorly for that new player, but it's just as bad for the people that are trying to play the game. And make no mistake, whether it's on the PTU or live, it's all alpha, it's all testing, it's all opportunities to provide feedback on things that are working well or not. And so if the servers perform poorly from a bunch of ships being spawned or whatever, like that's not something that the players can necessarily write bug reports on. I mean, sure you can for the issue council, but I I think it's more the networking and infrastructure team that SIG needs to address those issues. Yeah, they become more obvious at scale, but they should have enough data at this point to fix it. It was the same when it was a single server. It's the same with server meshing. So I'm not really sure why, if you're a paying customer, you have to have a worse experience, or if you're a free fly person, that you have to have a worse experience. It just doesn't work for anyone. And if the game's really good, people are going to make videos about it. They're going to tell their friends about it. The word of mouth spreads. And then I think, hey, we have everything we need. So it's just a little outrageous to me that they still try and do this. just as a way to make any sort of money. So, this sort of communication, I'm not going to go through, every little thing in here, but, they talk about trams, elevators, character repairs, stuff with the hangars. The instance hangars are a newer thing, so I get it. There's going to be some bugs. Some of these load times in Pyro. The missions, they call it a mission refactor, and that should make it perform better. But yet, in the midst of this, I have less mission options. I have mission markers that either don't show up at all, or they do show up and I have no way to quantum travel to it. So it'll be something like, I'll be in Pyro, you're doing a bounty, and you need to just fly to this last known location, but there's no way to get to it. And then it's millions of meters away, right? So there's nothing you can do other than drop it or, relogging and things like that. They did fix the issue with you would QT to a certain marker and it would like spin you around or it wouldn't get you there. Now there's this thing where you hit the button, you start the QT, and then it cancels it and you got to redo it. So it's just, lots of weird behavior, which that I'm not overly bothered by. It's more, as long as I can get to that location, even if it's a few extra button presses, that's okay. But otherwise, yeah, it's definitely something to work out. But yeah, I mean, overall, this was the whole chairman's letter thing, right? Which was the emphasis on gameplay. And while I'm all for that, the biggest thing in 4.0 from a gameplay perspective, like forget about server meshing, because that is something that enables gameplay. Like no one plays the game for server meshing. They play the game to do things that it offers. So with that, I'm looking at, for now, mining, salvaging, hauling, bounty hunting, and then, the events. And the only new content they added was this fight for Pyro. But they're calling this kind of the chapter 2 of Save Stanton. And the issue I have with this is that with Save Stanton, they had said that this is a one-off event. So, do it, get your rewards, but it's a one-off event and that's it, right? You're not going to be able to do it again. It's not going to be part of 1.0. It's purely for development purposes. I'm assuming, certain capabilities and features within the mission they can reuse. Great. But it's a one-off event. So you didn't really add any new content. And it is not a story-driven game. It is more of a sandbox game. So the things that I want the most are base building and crafting. It lets me make my own story. I can't really do that at all. And the things that maybe feed into that sandbox experience, so your industrial professions like mining, salvaging, and hauling, they're cool, but they're a means to an end. They're an input. They're not the output. You get the resources to build the base, to craft the item. That's the output. So from a system point of view, it's very incomplete. As far as the mission refactor, going back to that, they've only taken things out. They haven't added things in, right? Other than this one-off event. And, Fight for Pyro, if the server's working well, it doesn't take long at all. It's maybe a couple hours if you really want to take your time with it and have some issues. Maybe your ship blows up, whatever. But it's really not that involved, at least for the first phase. And that's it. So that's all we've gotten, right? There was the big build up to 4.0, right? We're talking like October, November, December. Then it's here, tons of bugs, the live preview, all these different versions simultaneously. Then we get to 4.0.1, which is just bug fixes. And I know in the versioning, I've had some people say, if it's 4.0.x, the .x is for bug fixes. But I thought, well, freight elevators, a bunch of the stuff with cargo, that all got introduced with dot 2 and dot 3. So that's not really true. Nothing they do is really consistent. Same with the live preview. That's just a new made up thing, which is okay. But acting like they have any consistency in their approach is kind of nonsensical. And yeah, so there's just really not much new for a player to do. And there is Pyro, but the things that make Pyro maybe unique, we haven't been able to do. So bounty hunting, you're still just blowing ships up in space. Well, I could do that in Stanton. It's the same thing. Hauling, yeah, there's slightly new locations, so that's kind of cool. Salvage is the same thing. Mining is a little new, right? There's a couple new harvestables, as they like to call them. But that's it. Otherwise, it's some new stuff to look at, but nothing to actually interact with. And that's after months and months of development. And then kind of looking forward, I think, what do I have to look forward to? Well, base building and crafting. And that's something that they said was going to be out in 12 to 18 months. So I think 2025 is highly possible. But when I look at the performance of things, how they run, how much they struggle with relatively small features or even old features like elevators, I'm a little skeptical, maybe really skeptical. And then, the other thing has been pushing out these patches when they're not ready, and then having some sort of expectation around the performance of live. Like live is like a production environment, and that means something. But, 4.0, they had to push out. It was the year-end thing. They wanted to get the Mirai Guardian out. That was a huge deal. And yet, it was full of bugs and unplayable for many players, including myself, for a variety of reasons. And then, this other one, right? So the new Misfortune. And this just kind of drove me nuts because they had to push out 4.0.1 for this. And, right, they act like this is a brand new ship, right? But it's, it's literally...
The Misfortune is a solo player salvage vessel. It's...
Right, so we're acting like this is a brand new ship. It's the Prospector that's been in the game for years. Most of it is reused, right? The only new thing is the cargo mechanism that you get from salvaging. It has a single beam, which just so happens to be the same as the mining. So it's not like they even had to redesign this for 2 beams or something like that. Super efficient approach, but this, some of these guys, they're newer. I've not seen them before in videos.
And utility.
And it's like, okay, we've got cargo on the side
of the previous ship, the Prospector, but obviously
Elwyn, no offense,
you can benefit from.
But he acts like this is something groundbreaking and new.
Tried to push the automatic cargo dispensing mechanism that's on the Vulture a little bit further, and sort of we've combined some of Misk's exterior cargo hold type of mechanic with the salvaging mechanism.
I kind of like that it does fit within the Misk style as far as the Hull series. It puts cargo on the outside, so it's very thematic. It's kind of new. Obviously, a developer had to, scale this to the smaller boxes.
Needed as you salvage.
There's a panel, and you can hit auto eject, or you can just eject it manually. And every time you.
So when we're talking about this, like a panel where it auto ejects, like this is literally what the Vulture has. They're I don't know if they're new to the company or what, but they're acting like this is something new. Like we've never heard of this, never seen this, never even thought of this. It's a little weird to me.
Eject, it will eject it out onto the exterior of the ship, and it will...
Boom. That right there, that is the exciting part. Everything else, the salvaging, is basically the same as a Vulture. The rest of it is the same as a Prospector. It's literally just this new mechanic that they developed, which shouldn't have taken too long. It's a small animation, a little cargo grid. They already have, cargo snapping to a grid, so lay out the grid. It's not really that crazy.
Automatically snap it to the cargo grid.
It is pretty cool that you can eject the crates simultaneously on each side of the ship if you want to. Seeing them, two salvage stations working together in tandem is kind of a new thing for us, so pretty neat.
You know, a lot of this, it
You
just,
can walk from the front all the way to the back.
it's effectively a
And then we've
prospector.
got an elevator in the rear for you to be able to bring those boxes in and out if you want to, or additional items. So just imagine you're going
Yeah, the rear elevator, I guess that's new, you know, but that doesn't really mean much to me.
out into space to salvage some
Um,
wrecks.
The rest
You
is just
strip
basic
the
salvage.
metal off the surface.
You know,
of the
we've seen
fins. If
salvaging.
they're small enough, you can actually put them in the elevator in the rear as storage. So it's not a dedicated cargo area on the inside, but it should be big enough for you to grab some of the smaller components
Exact same as the Vulture. A little bit different layout, but it's the exact
if
same.
you're able to salvage those.
To see just outside anywhere in cockpit, you're gonna love the Fortune cockpit. It's
I mean,
very
right
similar
here,
to
this
the
comment
sea,
really just kind of bothers me.
outside anywhere in any direction. It's very similar to the Prospector, so if you like the Prospector cockpit, you're gonna love the Fortune cockpit.
Like, who is he selling this to? Is he selling it to someone that is never heard of the game, never seen the game, never played the game? Because it is the Prospector. So it's like saying, well, if you like the Prospector, you're like this. No, it's the Prospector. It's just a variant. You know, if they would have just called the Prospector, you know, if they would have just had a generic name, you know, MISC ship, the Fortune would be a variant. The Prospector would be a variant. I'm not sure who they're trying to dazzle.
We're also going to be going out with the new dashboard that's been created by the UI team for MISC.
And, you know, again, it's a new dashboard for MISP, which applies to the Prospector as well. So,
More on convenience for the user.
you know, this right here, now I have two options to do the same thing. And, you know, in terms of like quality of life, in terms of kind of the long-term potential, I think this is great. You know, it's something I would want to see 5 years down the road, so I don't always have to use the Vulture for a single seat salvage. I got some variety. That's cool. But where the game is at today, right? So they rushed out 4.0.1 with more bugs, requiring more hot fixes, in something that's supposed to be live, which has some implication of running well. Just sell this ship. And it's not that exciting. You know, it's, if you already have the Vulture, it's the same price. You're not going to drop the Vulture to get the Fortune. You might get it in game, but that's not an option today. So I just don't get who they think they're advertising to. And the other thing was, when they added hauling, I think it was 324.2 or .3 or maybe some combination of the two. Bringing out the Zeus made sense. There wasn't anything quite in that size, so okay, cool. But this isn't the introduction of salvage. So, you know, if they would have just dropped this when the ship was ready, and then dropped 4.0.1 when it was ready, cool. But now when I look at it, we have 4.0.1, we have a ton of bugs still, ton of issues. It is getting better with the hot fixes, as I implied, but I've got a new ship that does the same thing as the other ship. Cool. And I've got a one-time event that doesn't really take that long. And that's it. That's it. So all the months of waiting for server meshing is the holy grail and everything. Where are we? Right. So the one thing I do like is their focus on playability, performance, etc. They canceled the free fly event, which are notorious for making the servers run terribly for whatever reason. They need to figure that out. But, you know, the thing that I wanted to discuss is this is called a systems engineering V. And in software engineering, you might be familiar with this, but the idea behind this is you essentially go from, at a high level, design, implementation, and then you test it and it's shipped out the door, right? So when SIG talks about introducing systems or features, right, it starts with, well, what is this system supposed to do? So when I talk about inputs and outputs, what does that actually mean? right? So ConOps, concept of operations, what is this system supposed to do? So salvage as a system, right? What are my inputs? Ships, right? Things that I can salvage from. What are my outputs? What does that look like? What is the value to the user? Oh, you get credits, you get materials. Cool. From a requirement standpoint, what is required of that? So you can simplify this, but it would be something along the lines of, what does the system do? And then what are the dependencies, right? So when they talk about, well, we can't do the mission refactor until we have certain features in the game, right? That should tell me when I actually can start development on this system, because if I don't have my dependencies in place, it's kind of pointless, right? Because I can't get to the end state. Then they implement it, right? That's your software development. That's when they actually have your software engineers or software developers write our code. The big problem of this with the systems engineering V is the whole right side, you, me, the players, that is us. We are integration and test. Essentially, software, they just chuck it into a build. And so while it's exciting, like, hey, there's a new build cooking, they're skipping all these steps, or rather they're expecting you to do them. And that becomes a whole issue in and of itself, because as the game goes forward and they want that polish, they're not doing the polish really. It's up to us. And there's a lot of people that don't go into the PTU. There's no incentive. They just want the progression, which is a little silly because they can wipe at any time, but people are hell-bent on progression. So they mostly play live. Now that's still an opportunity to report bugs and things of that nature, but PTU, where it's going to be presumably the buggiest, they're skipping that part. They're not actually verifying that what code they write actually works. In fact, I think if I bounce back to this, I might have to find it, but it was a list of 4.0.1 potential fixes. Potential fix. Now, sometimes you do have very difficult to find issues, and you're not sure if it'll fix it, and that's understandable. But when you have multiple line items for saying potential fix, they're not testing it, not to any significant degree. They don't play the game, which is also another reason that when they talk about playability, they are caught between a rock and a hard place. They want playability. They want a polished game because it's not. But there's also nothing to do in the game. So if you have a perfectly polished alpha, you realize, well, what do I do in this game though? Not much. So they need both. I guess it's good that they're working towards one of them, although this could be lip service to the chairman's letter. It could be temporary. It could be for sake of ship sales. Who really knows? We'll see how their actions line up over time, not just one instance. So the jury's still out. But bottom line is they need to test their software, and then they need to validate that it actually performs the way it is intended to per the design. And so this whole area is just sucks. They don't test their software, and it's hard to reliably get a player base to want to test software, right? Because there's a million things that you could potentially test. If I know the code changes that I made, I might have an idea of what to test. If I am a player and I just want to go mining every day and they fix something with salvage, I'm never going to find that issue. And so you're just relying on kind of this Wheel of Fortune approach that enough players test the right things to identify the issues in a repeatable fashion to then give that feedback to the development team, versus a dedicated test team, QA, whatever you want to call it, that can actually say, hey, this is what I need to focus on. right? I know that the system is supposed to do, you know, these 5 things. Let's go test these out step by step, or have an automated way to do it, or have regression tests being a means of saying, okay, it's supposed to do X. Let's build in a test so that every time we have a new build, it still does X, right? We don't want to break X every time we do a new build. But they just don't seem to have much of this in place, or at least certainly not a robust enough approach. So that is why this whole 4.0.x thing is not only months in the making, but we don't have a lot as players to experience. Because again, you know, Pyro by itself are just a bunch of planets and moons and asteroid clusters, and that's it. I know there's contested zones and there's the ways you can get the rewards, and that is new, right? So that's pretty cool, though it is a limited system. Once you actually play it, you realize there's not as much to it as you think. I think there's easy ways they can keep it fresh and fun, you know, randomizing it every week, new rewards, etc. So I'm not too worried about that today. It's a pretty good system, but it is incomplete. It's not that great on its own. But the most important thing is how well the game performs now, and how much I would expect crafting and base building, especially base building, is going to put on server performance, or more importantly, server degradation. And if they don't, you know, have a really smooth running game now, that's going to be a bad future. So the 4.01, whenever they get that on the roadmap, hopefully we'll see what sort of features they want to introduce next. But I personally don't care about engineering. Engineering is going to add even more overhead to the game. Just to do simple things, you now have to do more steps, more stuff, just to fly around, just to complete a mission. I'm not really that excited about it. I think that, along with Death of a Spaceman, like, it has its place maybe years down the road, but like right now, just give me the core sandbox tools, crafting and base building. Yes, that's Rust in space, and Rust is a fun game, and this can be a fun game, but they have to get it done. It has to work well. And I'm just, other than the canceling of the free flying event, I'm just not loving where this is going, and probably most importantly, how long it's taking, even with this renewed focus. So we'll see, but those are my thoughts.